Validation is a way of automatically checking whether user input is sensible and reasonable, but what it cannot do is check to see if the input is correct. There are all sorts of validation checks that we can carry out. The first one we're going to look at is to ensure that we have a string that has a minimum length. So let's have a look at how we might do this. So what we need to do, and this is really important, is we need to have our setup so that it keeps asking the user to enter the string. So each time it gets it wrong, it needs to then keep asking it until the user enters in the correct string. So let's set up a while loop to do that. So while loop is true, it's going to just continually ask the question, print enter string here, and then it's going to ask the inputs. And then we're going to check to see if that input is, well, in this case we're going to say we want a string to be entered that's longer than 5 characters. So if s is greater than 5, then we're happy with that. So that's what we want to happen. So we do now loop is false. So the idea is we break out of the loop at this stage. Loop is false, and therefore it tells us that then the string is okay. String okay. So what this code is doing is it's going to ask us to enter a string. If the string is less than 5 characters, it's going to still keep going around this loop, and it's going to keep asking us to enter a string until our string is greater than 5 characters long. So let's have a look at this working now. So we'll run our code now, and we'll enter a string that has fewer than 5 characters, and we'll do again with 4 characters. But now if we enter a string that has more than 5 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there should be 6 there, then it'll tell us that the string is okay, and then our code will move on and break out of the while loop. Sometimes we want to check to see if our string is not an empty string. So all we need to do in this situation now is to modify our if clause here so that when the length of the string does not equal 0, then we're able to break out of the loop and our program is able to continue. So again, we can just check this now, run it, check it. Let's run with an enter, just enter a string, so just press enter. So it's going to keep us asking in a string into our input. Sometimes we want to ensure that the value we're entering is an integer. We can do this by using try and except. So let's have a look at how we might do that. So let's do try here, and then we'll do print enter integer, and then we'll do value, so make sure that's an integer input, and then if that's all good, then we break out of the loop. So we'll do loop equals false, and then if there's a problem with that, we need to have some sort of except in there, except, and then it says here just have it print print not an integer. So what this will do, it'll use try and except, which we've looked at in a previous video, but it will keep asking us to enter an integer until we actually enter an integer. So if we're entering anything other than an integer, or anything that can't be converted into an integer, it'll just keep asking us. So let's run that and see how that works. So we're entering an integer. Well, clearly d is not an integer, so it's telling us it's not an integer. Now we need to enter an integer again. If I just do that, it's not going to give us any different outcome. But if I now enter actually an integer, 56, let's say, it'll be happy, it'll break out of the while loop, and then our program can continue. We're going to use an alternative method to try and accept now that uses the isDigit string method as a way of checking to see whether our input is an integer. So let's have a look at how we might implement this. So let's start with a string, an empty string, and we're going to again have the while loop. So what this will do is going to keep iterating through this while loop until our value that we enter is a digit. So we'll just enter this here. So enter integer, value equals input, and then we are able to, at the end there, convert it to an integer, because obviously we can't do that at this stage. It'll return us an error there. So what we do is we do that after we've ensured that it is a digit, so outside of that loop. And just to be sure, we can just print that out just to ensure that we know that it's okay. Right, so let's again run this and see how this works. So let's run it through. Invalid syntax. So again, forgot to put the colon there. Let's run this. So enter integer. So we've got, let's do anything that's not an integer, so that can't be converted into an integer. So DDD, that can't be converted into an integer. So it'll just keep us asking us to enter an integer until we actually put an integer in. So let's put 56 in, and again, it's all good and happy with that. Breaks out of the loop, and the program then is able to continue. We may wish, for example, to want an integer to be between certain values. So again, we can do a validation check on this. For example, we could check to make sure that if you're entering the age of a secondary school pupil, it's between the ages of say 11 and 19. So what we can do is we can incorporate a check in there for that to be the case. So let's have a look at how we do that. So I've already set up our while loop here, which is very similar to what we've seen previously. And now we can put an if statement in here that has value is greater than or equal to 11, and value is less than or equal to 19. And then we can do, at this point we want to break out of the loop equals false, and then we can just do print integer within range. So we can have it like that. So let's run that. Really, what we should be doing as well is checking to make sure that our value is actually an integer when we enter it. So we still need to use either try and accept or the isDigit method. So we're going to now integrate this with the try and accept approach to ensure that our value not only is within a range, but also it's actually an integer as well, because that's clearly going to fail. This code is going to fail if an integer is not input in the first place. Let's actually have a look at that. So if I was to enter in that there, it's just going to crash out in a not a very nice way. So let's ensure that we're putting a try and accept in there now, just to make sure that the value we're entering is an integer. So within here now we can just put in try, and it'll do all those steps that we have here. So there's nothing to change there, but we also need to ensure we've got the accept in. And again, we can just have print statement that says print value is not an integer. So now our code is much more robust, and when we run it and enter in anything that can't be converted to an integer, it should just keep us asking us to enter an integer until we do that, and everything now is all good and more robust.